Yes, I watched the first animated movie from every country so that you don't have to. And trust me, the history behind these movies is insane.
For example, the first Japanese animated movie was created during World War II,
serving as propaganda against Western powers like the USA. And to drive their message home, the film even parodied Popeye and Bluto as a way to mock the Americans. Welcome to part 1, where we are exploring the first animated movies from top anime producing countries like the USA, China, Japan, and Korea. And to see how it all began, watch till the end. Because in this video, I'm sharing the story and revealing the fascinating history of how these movies were made. So let's not waste time anymore and let's get started. At first, let's talk about the first animated movie from America, which is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Now, I'm almost 99% sure that even if you haven't watched this movie, you have at least heard its name several times. When Snow White was released in 1937, the movie's initial budget was just $250,000, which grew to $1.5 million as time went on. The movie earned around $418 million at the time, which adjusted for inflation would be over $1 billion today. Although the movie was released several times, it was still an impressive feat for that time. Walt Disney produced the movie himself, and he made a huge gamble by using his life savings to make the movie. And it paid off. The plan to create Snow White began in 1934, and at that time, many believed it would be a major flop. People thought making a full-length animated film was impossible. Nothing like it had ever been done before. But as you know now, after its release, Snow White went on to become a global icon. 2 years after its release, the movie won 1 full-sized Oscar and 7 miniature Oscars at the time. Snow White's story was adapted from Brothers Grimm fairy tale Schneewittchen, first published in 1842. Walt Disney first saw a silent film version of Snow White in 1916 when he was just 14 years old, and that early impression stayed with him, eventually inspiring him to create his own animated adaptation years later. Now, if I had to describe the animation of the movie in just one word, then I would say excellent. Watching Snow White doesn't feel like you're watching a movie from that era. When I first saw it, I honestly thought it might be a remake from the 1970s. That's because I had already watched the restored versions of the first Japanese and Chinese animated movies, and the animation quality of Snow White compared to those was like day and night. What you are seeing on the screen right now are the restored version clips of the movie. The original version isn't available online right now. So no, the original version didn't look this good back in 1937. The restored version is a bit clearer, but honestly the difference isn't huge. And even then, I'd say the animation was way ahead of its time. It's kind of sad that the country which once led the world in animation is now falling behind, especially when animated shows have become one of the most watched forms of entertainment in history. Since then, I feel like the American animation style has actually de-evolved. Even some of its biggest hits like Invincible still struggle with inconsistent or low quality animation. Now, back to Snow White. The plot is quite simple and lacks much depth, but that's expected given the time it was made. The movie is 83 minutes long, and though it feels a bit lengthy for the story, it was fitting for that era. Snow White is a kind and beautiful princess whose jealous stepmother, the evil queen, wants to be the fairest in the land. But when the queen's magic mirror tells her that Snow White has taken that title, she becomes enraged and orders a huntsman to kill her. But then the huntsman couldn't go through with it, so he lets Snow White escape into the forest, where she eventually finds shelter with 7 dwarfs. Snow White and 7 Dwarfs is also a musical animated film. Right at the beginning, we get a brief appearance from a prince who shows up, sings a duet with Snow White, and then disappears for most of the movie. Now, listening to the music really made me realize how much musical taste has changed over the past 100 years. It's so different from what we're used to today. After that, as Snow White escapes into the forest, a group of friendly animals leads her to the dwarf's cottage. The film spends a good amount of time introducing the dwarfs, and this part is filled with comedy. Surprisingly, most of the jokes still work today. I'd honestly rate the comedy an 8 out of 10. A big chunk of the movie focuses on dwarfs' goofy behavior, which is fun at first, but some scenes drag on a bit too long and start to feel repetitive. Interestingly, these kinds of silly, exaggerated gags were later copied in early Chinese and Korean animated films, but I think they didn't pull it off nearly as well. Also, I have got to mention the animal designs, especially especially the rabbits. They were incredibly cute and charming, and honestly perfect for a film made for kids back in the day. Later in the story, the evil queen disguises herself as an old woman and tricks Snow White into eating a poisoned apple, putting her into a deep, death-like sleep. The forest animals witness this and quickly alert the dwarfs, who chase down the queen until she falls off a cliff to her death. Then, the movie jumps straight to Snow White's funeral. She's placed inside a glass coffin, and out of nowhere, the same prince from the beginning just shows up and kisses her. Yep, the guy who appeared for maybe 2 minutes at the start comes back and kisses what is essentially a dead body. This scene was handled really poorly and just felt awkward and weird. Now, after that, as you guys know, Snow White wakes up, says a quick goodbye to the dwarfs, who, by the way, actually saved and took care of her, and then rides off with a prince, a man she barely knows. This ending felt incredibly rushed, and honestly, it doesn't do justice to the rest of the film. There are many small problems in the movie, like the dwarf scenes being unnecessarily dragged out. That part didn't need so much time. Instead, the film could have focused more on the love story between the prince and Snow White at the start of the movie, because the way the story sets it up that a true love's kiss can wake her, in order to make that part good, the love story between Snow White and the prince needed time, which is missing in the movie. For example, showing the prince searching for her for some time after she ran into the forest would have made the story much better. But I get it. It was 1937 and the first ever animated movie, and they initially thought of giving the prince more story time and depth, but at that time, for some reason, animating the prince was extremely hard to do. So they decided to cut his part out. In the future, I think this movie deserves a proper animated remake, unlike the Rachel Zegler one. But looking at how the 2025 Snow White is shaping up, I honestly don't think they'll do justice to this classic, even if they make an animated remake. If I rate it based on 1937 standards, I would give it a 10 out of 10. But if I rate it by today's standards, it's a 6.5 out of 10, which is still great for a movie that is almost 100 years old. On IMDb, it has a rating of 7.6 out of 10, and I think that's fairly justified overall. Now, before we go any further, please like and subscribe. It really helps the video to reach more people and motivates me to make better videos for you guys. Let's talk about the first animated movie from China, Princess Iron Fan, which was released in 1941. Princess Iron Fan not only inspired the Chinese animation industry, but also deeply influenced early Japanese animators. The movie influenced Osamu Tezuka, who was the first manga writer of Japanese anime, and also the writer and animator of the first Japanese animated series, Astro, which helped Japanese anime get to the place where it is today. The huge success of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs inspired the two Wan brothers from China to make their own first animated movie. It was created during the Second Sino-Japanese War, under extremely difficult conditions, with limited materials, tight budgets, and wartime hardship. The movie was a black and white film due to the limitations of the time, and because of that, you can clearly see it's way behind Snow White's animation. Now, I'm not saying that the animation or the movie is bad, because this is pretty much what I expected from a 1941 animated movie. The first American movie set the bar really high for its time, which made my expectations really high. The animators of Princess Iron Fan were often unpaid, and also shortages of film stock and equipment happened due to hardships of the Second Sino-Japanese War. The movie was a huge success in China. Exact revenue figures are unknown, but its success helped the Wan brothers continue making films and solidified the foundation for Chinese animation. The animation style was influenced by Chinese opera, traditional art, and Disney's Snow White. And it also featured rotoscoping for more fluid motion. Even though the animation style was inspired by Snow White, I personally think Princess Iron Fan's animation is very different and has its own unique Chinese art style. Now, the movie Princess Iron Fan is based on chapter 59, Stealing the Magic Fan 3 Times, from the classic Chinese novel Journey to the West, written in the 16th century by Wu Cheng'en. Journey to the West is one of the most influential works in Chinese literature and mythology. Written in the 16th century during the Ming Dynasty, traditionally attributed to Wu Cheng'en. It is a mythological adventure novel blending religion, folklore, fantasy, and satire. The story of the movie was that the Monkey King Sun Wukong and his companions Pigsy and Shamong are on a quest with their master Tan Sen Zeng to retrieve Buddhist scriptures from India. During their journey, their path is blocked by flaming mountain, a place engulfed in magical fire. To get through, they need the magical banana leaf fan which belongs to the Princess Iron Fan, because only that fan can put out the fire on the mountain. However, Princess Iron Fan, angered by past conflicts with son Wukong, refuses to lend the fan. Wukong, Pixie and Shamong each try separately to trick Princess Iron Fan and her husband. Eventually, their master makes them realize that only by combining their strengths can they overcome the challenge. After that, Sun Wukong and his companions join forces to battle the Ox King, Princess Iron Fan's husband. Together, they finally defeat him, allowing Wukong to seize the magical fan and extinguish the flames, clearing the path for their journey to continue. Now, I must say that even though this was a movie from 1941, trying to get the fan from the princess was quite enjoyable to see. I think this chapter 59 from Journey to the West fits more as an animated series rather than a movie. Even in this day and age, if they adapt the story into an anime, I think it would still be a hit. Even though I think this story does not fit to be a full movie, still, the execution of the story was done well in the movie. The direction was also great all throughout. The only part they could improve on is the animation. I know they had limitations at the time, and this is from 1941, and that's good for the time. But after watching what Snow White did in 1937, I have to say this could have been better. Now, even though the movie's animation was bad at the time, Chinese animation has significantly upgraded their animation style in recent times. I would say even better than Japan in some cases. The animation in Fog Hill of the Five Elements, To Be Hero X and Lord of the Mysteries are brilliant. They didn't just copy others, they actually brought something new. They made their own unique animation style. The fusion of both 3D and 2D animation is brilliantly done in Donghua's like To Be Hero X and The Lord of the Mysteries. Now, let's talk about the ratings of the movie. And for that time, the movie is a solid 7.5 out of 10. But if it was a movie of this time, I would give it a 5.5 out of 10. Because the animation is outdated in this day and age. Now, unlike many countries that started with fairy tales, Japan's first animated movie was born out of war. Released in 1945, Momotaros' Sacred Sailors, the first Japanese animated movie, was a government-funded propaganda film created during World War II. This movie is probably the most interesting movie on this list, and in some cases, it was way ahead of its time. Commissioned by the Japanese Imperial Navy, the movie was created to promote nationalism and militaristic values, especially aimed at inspiring patriotism in Japanese children at the time. The movie was made particularly against the British Empire, and by extension, their Western allies like the United States. Mitsuyo Seo, a respected animator of that time in Japan, is the director of this movie. Mitsuyo Seo is credited as one of the founding fathers of Japanese animation industry. This movie actually helped a lot to get the Japanese animation industry to where it is today. The first manga writer and the first anime creator, Osamu Tezuka, was highly influenced by this movie. Momotaros' Sacred Sailors wasn't Mitsuya Seo's first propaganda film. Mitsuya Seo had previously made propaganda films for Japan, which gave him the opportunity to make the first full-length animated feature in Japan. Surprisingly enough, Momotaros' Sacred Sailors is actually a sequel. The first part, Momotaros' Sea Eagle, is a short film. So that's why Momotaros' Sacred Sailors is Japan's first full-length animated feature film, even though it's a sequel to Momotaros' Sea Eagles. Momotaros' Sea Eagles was based on the Pearl Harbor incident, and Momotaros' Sacred Sailors was loosely based on Japan's military expansion into the Southeast Asia during World War II, particularly their colonial invasions of British-held territories like Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. The story was heavily inspired by the original folktale of Momotaro. Momotaro's original story is very famous and iconic in Japan, and in the movie, they tried to mimic a lot of the elements from that story. In the original story, an old couple finds Momotaro inside a peach as a baby boy. Then, when he grows up, he becomes a very strong, powerful young man who defeats the demons who terrorize the villages. On his journey, he befriends 3 talking animals, a dog, a monkey, and a pheasant. In the movie, Momotaro's role as a brave, kind leader translates into a symbol of national leadership. Like the emperor or the ideal Japanese officer, he doesn't just fight evil, he leads, inspires, and unifies the nation through the animals representing the people. All of the characters from Japan's side in the war were animals. In the movie, they used animals to appeal to young viewers at the time. Cute animals like rabbits were used as sailors to depict that the people of Japan were noble. Like in the original Momotaro story, the enemies in the film are portrayed as clumsy, cowardly, Western-looking humans, who are like the demons in the original Momotaro story. I think this movie also shows Japan's obsession with cuteness. The sailors being cute animals in something as serious as this is a prime example of it. Almost 100 years later, we still see the overuse of cuteness in every Japanese anime today. Concepts like this also explain how Japan's obsession with cuteness is real, and anime plays a huge part in it. In the movie, animals of different species working together reflects the propaganda idea that Japan is a harmonious, disciplined society, unlike the chaotic and decadent West, and how happy the other countries under Japan are. The movie opens with a monkey sailor proudly recounting his heroic experiences in battle. At first, I assumed he was the main character, but I was completely wrong. Momotaro, the actual protagonist, doesn't show up until much later in the film. And even then, his screen time is surprisingly brief. In the movie, they show the animals dancing, singing, and working together in preparation for war. It's what you would typically expect from a children's movie at the time, except for the war part. The film also features scenes where sailors write letters back home, expressing their deep love and loyalty to their country. These messages were clearly intended to inspire children to adopt similar patriotic values in the future. Story-wise, the film lags far behind Snow White and Princess Iron Fan. It's quite dull for the most part. However, the animation shows noticeable improvement over Princess Iron Fan, which makes sense given it was released 4 years later. What you're seeing on the screen right now is the 4K restored version. Here's what the original version looked like. And even then, when compared side by side with Princess Iron Fan, it still holds up better visually. The movie doesn't have much of a story to begin with. In fact, I feel like I've already told you about 90% of it in just 3 or 4 sentences. While I didn't enjoy most of the film, the last 10% genuinely surprised me in a good way. In that final stretch, the movie portrays how the British took control of Goa and messed everything up. Then, it flips the script by showing the Japanese sailors defeating the Western forces and successfully capturing the territory they were after. It's oddly entertaining, especially how they depicted the Western soldiers as lazy, clumsy, goofy, and completely incompetent. It plays out like a satirical roast, and surprisingly, it's really well directed and funny. The best part of the movie also comes at this point. In the scene when they are taking over, we see characters like Popeye and Bluto from Popeye the Sailor Man, which was released 12 years before the movie. The cameo or parody of Popeye's character in this movie, I really didn't think something like this could happen. I also found out that characters from Popeye the Sailor Man were also roasted in Momotaro's Sea Eagle. It's moments like these that made the film feel strangely ahead of its time. Going into this project, I assumed things like parody, colored animation, or choreographed action only became common much later. But clearly, they were there from the very beginning. At the end, Momotaro goes into a meeting with the white leaders of the West. The white commanders try to negotiate with Momotaro, but Momotaro gives them no time and tells them to surrender immediately. With no choice in hand, they surrender and the movie ends there. The last part of the movie was created to portray what was supposed to happen in the future of the war, according to the directors. And by the way, the English of these white generals was really funny and the accent was so accurate. They had better English voice actors for white people in the movie in 1945 than English-speaking voice actors of today in Japan. I often see bad English in Japanese anime by white characters, and it's kind of surprising to see that they did it better in 1945, when things like this were way harder than now. Now, about its box office. Unlike modern anime films, Momotaro's Sacred Sailors didn't generate box office revenue. It was distributed directly to schools and military groups. Its success wasn't measured in money, but in how effectively it spread ideology. After Japan's defeat in World War II, all propaganda films were banned by the Allied occupation forces. Mitsuyo Seo, who had socialist leanings, was seen as politically inconvenient and sidelined by both the government and the industry. He left animation and turned to illustrating children's books and educational materials. Though he lived to be nearly 99 years old, he never returned to directing anime. Momotaro's Sacred Sailors was lost after the war and remained obscure for decades. Later, it was rediscovered in 1983 in an archive in Japan and later restored. The movie is iconic because it's the first ever Japanese animated movie in history. But in terms of story, I would say overall it's not a good movie. I would have given it a 3 out of 10, but for Popeye's appearance, even though he was roasted, I'm giving it a 4 out of 10. Korean manhwa-based anime are rapidly gaining popularity, with hits like Solo Leveling, Lookism, and The Beginning After the End. Though new to the anime scene, Korea has been producing impressive titles in both manhwa and animation. So let's talk about Hongil-dong, the first Korean anime. The movie was released in 1967 and was based on the Korean folk hero Hongil-dong, a legendary outlaw, often referred to as the Korean Robin Hood. The story of Hongil-dong originates from the 17th century novel Hongil-dong Jeon, The Tale of Hongil-dong, written by Hyo Gyun, a scholar and social reformer during the Joseon dynasty. The Joseon dynasty was a Korean kingdom that was one of the longest-lasting dynasties in East Asian history. The novel was a powerful critique of the rigid class system of the Joseon dynasty. At that time, illegitimate children, even if born to noble fathers, were denied basic rights, barred from holding government positions, and treated as social outcasts, regardless of their talent or intelligence. The Tale of Hongil-dong is considered Korea's first ever novel written in Hangul, making it both a literary and political milestone. Hangul is the Korean alphabet, created in 1443 by King Sejong the Great and his scholars. Before that, Koreans used classical Chinese characters, Hanja, which were hard to learn and limited to the elite. Hangul was designed to be simple, logical, and easy to learn, allowing even commoners to read and write. This led to a major rise in literacy and was a crucial step towards educational equality in Korea. So you can get an idea of just how significant this story is in Korean history and why they made their first movie about it. The animation style was inspired by Japanese and Western works, particularly Toei Animation and Disney, but infused with Korean cultural elements. Director Shin Dong-han, who had experience in short animations and worked under renowned producer Shin Sang-ok, created this film during a time when South Korea was under authoritarian rule and media was often used for nationalistic or educational purposes. Despite the lack of infrastructure, budget, and experience in full-length animation, the team, many of whom learned on the job, managed to complete the film in under a year. And honestly, given those conditions, it's an impressive achievement. Even though the clips you're seeing now are from the 4K restored version, the animation still holds up remarkably well.
A follow-up film named Hopi and Charulbawi was released in the same year as Hongil-dong.
This sequel includes Charulbawi as the main character, who was a side character in the first movie. At a time when Korea was still rebuilding post-war, Hongil-dong was more than entertainment. It was a symbol of national pride and self-reliance. Okay, let's talk about the story of the movie now. So, the story starts with a minister celebrating his birthday. Suddenly, a shady, criminal-looking guy crashes the party. Then, he beats up the house guards and walks into the mansion. Then, he tells the minister he's a fortune teller and warns him, if you don't listen to me, your life will be in danger. Naturally, the minister is a little freaked out and asks what this is all about. The creepy fortune teller then drops a bomb. He tells the minister to kick his illegitimate son Gil-dong out of the house, or else his future will be ruined. The minister hesitates because how can he just kick out his own son even if he's illegitimate? But the shady guy hits him with, you should think about your family before your emotions, and just like that he leaves, and in the morning the minister tells his son Gil-dong to get out of the house. Now, was the minister crazy for listening to a random stranger and kicking out his own son? I don't know. Old stories were weird and this is a perfect example of this. Later, we find out the fortune teller was just a pawn sent by the minister's real wife who wanted Gil-dong gone. Anyway, Gil-dong leaves home and soon runs into a child robber named Charulbawi. Charulbawi tries to fight Gil-dong, but Gil-dong easily defeats him and learns that Charulbawi's dad was flogged to the death by the village magistrate. Feeling bad for the kid, Gil-dong decides to take him along as a companion. From here, the story gets more straightforward. Gil-dong runs into the same village magistrate who killed Charulbawi's dad. Then Gil-dong sees the minister flogging a poor man who couldn't afford to pay his taxes, so he steps in, saves the man, and defeats the magistrate's goons. But after saving the guy, Gil-dong is chased by the goons and ends up overwhelmed. They tried to throw in some goofy Looney Tunes style humor in the movie here, but yeah, it didn't really land. After that, Gil-dong escapes to the jungle with Charulbawi, where they meet a martial arts master. Gil-dong begs to be trained by the master, and after days of doing chores and proving his patience, the master agrees. After months of intense training, Gil-dong is ready. The master then tells him to join his his other students, who turn out to be rebels fighting against the magistrate. Gildong and Charulbai then joins the group. Together they raid the magistrate's goons and take them down easily. But now the magistrate wants revenge. His right-hand man suggests kidnapping Gildong's parents to use them as leverage, and the magistrate agrees and kidnaps Gildong's parents. Gildong finds out about his parents and rushes to the magistrate's place. The magistrate was just about to execute Gildong's parents, but just then Gildong shows up with the army. A big battle occurs. Gildong and the rebels wipe the floor with the magistrate's goons and saves his parents. After everything, Gildong's father begs for forgiveness for what he did, and in classic ending style, they all live happily ever after. This movie was released way after the first animated Japanese, American, and Chinese movies, so the quality is better than theirs, except the American one. The American one set the bar so high that decades later, it couldn't be topped. The animation was fairly good in this movie, but by the time Korea released its first animated movie, China and Japan had already released their first colored animated movie, and they were a bit better than Hong Gil-dong. The main character's face, as you guys can see, doesn't look good. The design style in this case could have been better. As a movie, I would give it a solid 6 out of 10. Korean anime is fairly new compared to other countries like America, China, and Japan, but the way they are going, I'd say Korean anime will be huge in the next 4 to 5 years. K-pop Demon Hunters is a good example of this. The movie has been praised internationally by anime lovers. China recently is making animes that are even better than many current Japanese animes, and Korea is also catching up. The common thing in all of these movies, except for Snow White, is that they represent stories deeply rooted in their culture. Now, if you guys ask me whether these movies are worth watching in 2025, I'd say no, because they are not good movies if you compare them to what we see today. You can see them as a piece of history of how animation was back then, and that's why I made this video, so that you guys can see how the movies were back in the day in a short amount of time. If you guys are here till the end, don't forget to like and subscribe for more anime related content like this. If you are still here till the end, so click on the video on the screen where I ranked the highest rated animes of all time. If you liked this one, I'm sure you'll like that one too.